You gave them your heart, fully, fearlessly, only for them to leave when your love was the deepest. It hurts, it's confusing, and worst of all, it makes you question everything. But what if their sudden departure had nothing to do with you? What if, in loving them completely, you unknowingly showed them a mirror they weren't ready to face? Few experiences are as painful as loving someone with your entire being, only to watch them walk away when that love is most alive. You wonder, was it something I did? Was I not enough? But legendary psychologist Carl Jung reveals a startling truth. Their retreat often has little to do with you, and everything to do with the unconscious fears and shadows your love unearthed in them. Jung's work teaches us that love doesn't just connect hearts. It acts like a spotlight, exposing the hidden parts of ourselves we've buried. For some, that light is too much. The closer you get, the more they feel the weight of their own unresolved wounds, their fear of vulnerability, or even their guilt for not being able to love you back the same way. So if you've ever been left at the height of your devotion, understand this. Sometimes, the purest love becomes the very thing that scares them away, not because it's flawed, but because it's real. And that reality forces a choice. Either they face what's been hiding inside them, or they run. Let's explore why. 1. The psychology of fear and the shadow self. The moment love begins to deepen, something unexpected often happens. The person who once seemed so open suddenly withdraws, becomes distant, or even leaves entirely. At first glance, it makes no sense. If love is supposed to bring people closer, why does it sometimes push them away? Carl Jung's concept of the shadow holds the key to understanding this paradox. The shadow is the hidden part of our psyche where we bury everything we don't want to face. Our fears, our shame, our deepest insecurities. We lock these parts away because they're painful, because they contradict the image we want to project to the world, or because we simply don't know how to integrate them into who we are. But love, in its most genuine form, doesn't allow these things to stay hidden. It acts like a mirror, reflecting back not just the light within us, but also the darkness we've tried so hard to ignore. When someone is met with unwavering love, the kind that asks for nothing in return yet sees them completely, it can become unsettling. They may have spent years avoiding their own emotional wounds, building walls to keep themselves safe from past betrayals or childhood neglect. But real love dismantles those walls, not forcefully, but by its very presence. It creates a space where vulnerability is inevitable, and for someone who has spent a lifetime running from their pain, that can feel like a threat. Suddenly, the love you're offering isn't just affection, it's an invitation to step into uncharted emotional territory, to face the parts of themselves they've refused to acknowledge. And if they're not ready for that kind of reckoning, their instinct will be to retreat. This is where projection comes into play. Rather than confronting their own discomfort, they may unconsciously shift the blame onto you or the relationship itself. You're too much, or too intense, or the timing is just off. But in reality, what they're reacting to isn't you. It's the reflection of their own unresolved turmoil. They might accuse you of being clingy when what they truly fear is their own dependency. They might pull away under the guise of needing space when what they're really avoiding is the intimacy that forces them to confront their fear of abandonment. It's a defense mechanism, a way to keep their shadow at arm's length by making the problem external rather than internal. This dynamic is especially painful because, from your perspective, you've done nothing wrong. In fact, you've loved them in the way we all hope to be loved. Deeply, sincerely, without conditions. But that's precisely what makes it so destabilizing for someone who isn't at peace with their own shadows. Love, in its purest form, doesn't just accept, it reveals. And if they aren't prepared to face what's been revealed, their only option may be to leave. This doesn't make them cruel or incapable of love. It simply means they have their own inner work to do, work that no amount of your love can do for them. The tragedy is that sometimes, the more wholeheartedly you love someone, the more you become the catalyst for their own unhealed pain. Not because your love is lacking, but because it's the very thing that illuminates what they're not yet ready to see. 2. The role of attachment styles. The way we give and receive love isn't just shaped by our conscious choices, it's deeply rooted in our earliest experiences of connection. Modern psychology identifies distinct attachment styles that develop in childhood and continue influencing our romantic relationships as adults. Those with an anxious attachment style often crave closeness and reassurance, while avoidant individuals associate intimacy with discomfort. When these two styles meet, a painful dynamic frequently unfolds. The more the anxious partner seeks connection, the more the avoidant partner withdraws. This isn't about games or manipulation, it's an unconscious survival mechanism. For the avoidantly attached person, emotional vulnerability doesn't feel like safety, it feels like danger. Their nervous system interprets deepening intimacy as a threat, triggering a primal need to create distance. This instinct to withdraw becomes particularly strong when love reaches what should be its most secure phase. Where a securely attached person might relax into commitment, an avoidant individual often experiences what psychologists call fear of engulfment. There's a terrifying sense that by merging with another person, they'll lose their autonomy and identity. Jung described this as the tension between our human need for connection and our equally powerful need for individuality. For some, this fear becomes so overwhelming that they must physically or emotionally exit the relationship to regain a sense of self. Ironically, it's often when the relationship is at its most stable and loving that this panic surfaces, precisely because stability requires a surrender of defenses they've relied on their entire lives. What makes this pattern especially heartbreaking is the element of self-sabotage. On some level, the avoidant person may recognize they're pushing away something good, but the compulsion to flee overrides this awareness. They might manufacture conflicts, become hypercritical of their partner, or emotionally check out, all unconscious strategies to recreate the distance that feels familiar. This isn't calculated cruelty, it's a misguided form of self-protection. The painful truth is that their withdrawal has little to do with the worthiness of the person loving them, and everything to do with internal wounds that predate the relationship. Until these deep-seated patterns are brought into conscious awareness, the cycle will likely repeat, not because love isn't possible, but because for some, being loved unconditionally feels more terrifying than being alone. The tragedy of this dynamic is that both partners end up experiencing their worst fears. The anxious partner faces abandonment just as they dared to hope for security, while the avoidant partner confirms their belief that intimacy leads to loss of self. Neither recognizes that their reactions are echoes of childhood adaptations rather than reflections of current reality. This is why understanding attachment theory can be so transformative. It allows us to see these patterns not as inevitable truths about relationships, but as learned behaviors that can be unlearned with awareness and effort. The work isn't easy, but it's the only path to breaking cycles that keep people trapped between their hunger for connection and their terror of it. 3. The unconscious pursuit of wholeness. We often enter relationships carrying an unconscious hope that our partner will complete us, that their love will fill the empty spaces we've never learned to fill ourselves. Jung called this process of becoming whole individuation, and while relationships can catalyze this growth, they cannot substitute for it. Many people initially feel magnetically drawn to partners who embody qualities they've disowned in themselves. Perhaps someone free-spirited attracts a rule follower, or someone emotionally expressive draws a reserved partner. In the beginning, this feels like magic, like finding one's missing piece. But when the relationship starts requiring them to develop those very qualities within themselves, when the reserved partner must learn to express emotions, or the rule follower needs to embrace spontaneity, that's when panic sets in. The very traits that first attracted them become threatening, not because the traits themselves are problematic, but because they highlight aspects of self that haven't yet been integrated. This explains why some people can seem so devoted in the early stages, only to retreat when the relationship moves beyond fantasy into reality. They may have fallen in love with an idealized version of you, the version that perfectly complemented their psyche without asking them to grow. Real intimacy, however, requires showing up as complete individuals, flaws and all. When faced with this truth, some choose flight over growth. It's not that they're incapable of love, but that they're not yet capable of the self-confrontation that lasting love demands. They preferred you as a mirror for their fantasies rather than as a separate human being with needs and imperfections that would challenge them to evolve. The cruel irony is that by leaving, they remain trapped in the very incompleteness they hoped love would solve. Relationships inevitably expose our unfinished business, our fears, our defenses, our unlived potentials. For those committed to growth, this is the gift of intimacy. But for others, the mirror becomes too confronting, and they'd rather shatter the reflection than face what it shows them. This doesn't make them weak or flawed. It simply makes them human. We all have aspects of ourselves we're afraid to meet, and love, in its wisdom, always knows exactly where to shine the light. The question is never whether we're worthy of love, but whether we're brave enough to receive what it's trying to teach us. The fantasy of perfect love persists because it promises wholeness without work. It suggests we can find completion in another person rather than through the difficult, beautiful process of becoming whole within ourselves. But true love doesn't complete us. It reveals where we're still incomplete. Some will misinterpret this revelation as proof the relationship is wrong, when in truth, it's proof the relationship is working exactly as it should. The ache we feel when someone walks away from this mirror isn't just grief for the lost relationship, it's grief for the unlived potential in both people, for the growth that might have been. Yet even in this, there's purpose. Sometimes love's greatest gift isn't staying, but leaving, and in doing so, showing us exactly where our work begins. For what you can do. When someone walks away at the peak of your love, the most painful assumption is that you weren't enough. But the truth is far more liberating. Their leaving had nothing to do with your worth, and everything to do with their own unmet relationship with themselves. Consider this. The same love that felt overwhelming to them might feel like home to someone emotionally available. The way they struggled to receive your affection wasn't a commentary on how lovable you are, but rather a reflection of how much love they could tolerate. Their capacity for intimacy was limited not by your actions, but by their own unresolved history. This realization doesn't erase the hurt, but it does free you from internalizing what was never yours to carry. The healthiest boundary you can build is understanding that another person's emotional limitations are their work to heal, not your failure to fix. Jungian psychology offers a profound alternative to chasing after those who retreat, the path of individuation, of becoming whole within yourself. This isn't about self-improvement to make yourself more lovable, but about deep self-discovery that makes you less dependent on others to define your worth. When you turn the focus inward, you begin to recognize how much of your pain comes not just from losing them, but from the parts of yourself you abandoned while loving them. Perhaps you muted your needs, or confused attachment with love, or saw their potential more clearly than their reality. Your healing begins when you stop asking why they couldn't love you properly, and start asking why you tolerated breadcrumbs when you deserved a feast. This isn't blame, it's empowerment. The most magnetic quality isn't desperate love, but the quiet confidence of someone who knows their own value. Letting go with compassion might be the most difficult yet transformative step. It means releasing both the fantasy of who they could have been and the resentment for who they weren't. Compassion in this context isn't about excusing their behavior, but about understanding that their departure was the kindest truth they could offer, better than half-hearted presents or false promises. There's a peculiar peace in realizing that by leaving, they gave you both the gift of clarity. Wish them well on their journey, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve the lightness that comes with releasing bitterness. The love that once flowed outward now has space to nourish you instead. In the end, you'll discover that the person who needed your love the most was always the one staring back at you in the mirror, and that realization is where every great love story truly begins. The paradox of love is that the more whole we become within ourselves, the more capable we are of healthy connection with others. What feels like an ending is often the universe making room for relationships that don't require you to shrink, beg, or abandon yourself. The right love won't feel like drowning, it will feel like two whole people choosing each other, not out of lack, but from overflow. Until then, be patient with your healing. The cracks in your heart aren't signs of damage, but openings where your wisdom enters. Every step you take towards self-love isn't moving you further from relationship, but ensuring that when love comes again, it will be the kind that stays. What we've uncovered here is both painful and profoundly freeing. When someone leaves after you've loved them most deeply, it's rarely about you. It's about what your love forced them to confront within themselves. Whether it was their shadow self, their attachment wounds, or their fear of true intimacy, their retreat was an unconscious act of self-preservation. You didn't love too much. You simply loved in a way that revealed the work they weren't yet ready to do. And while that doesn't soften the sting of their absence, it does release you from the burden of believing you weren't enough. The path forward isn't about waiting for them to change or regretting your vulnerability. It's about honoring the courage it took to love without reservation and recognizing that the right love won't ask you to dim your light to make someone else comfortable. Every relationship, even those that end, is a mirror and a teacher. Some people enter your life not to stay, but to show you where you still need to heal, where your boundaries should stand, and how deeply you're capable of loving, even when that love must now be directed inward. If this exploration of love, loss, and Jungian wisdom resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you experienced this kind of departure? What did it teach you about yourself? Let's continue the conversation in the comments below. And if you found value here, consider liking and subscribing for more insights into psychology, relationships, and the journey toward wholeness. As we close, let's hold on to these words from Carl Jung. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Even in endings, there is alchemy. You are not the same person you were before this love, and that, more than anything, is the gift it left behind.